Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in for Fran Stoddard. This is the growing season, and it's not an overstatement to say that the food we grow needs pollinators. Birds, bats, butterflies, and bees are among the pollinators that play a big role in agriculture. And our first stop today is in Charlotte, where Keith Silva spoke with a former UVM researcher who studied the factors that can make a farm bee-friendly.
When it comes to bees, Charlie Nicholson knows how to catch a buzz.
That's our queen. Ooh, she wants to get out.
Nicholson studies wild bees. And if you're wondering, aren't all bees wild? Nicholson says you can't be serious.
The bee that we all know and love, that honeybee, isn't actually a native wild bee. They can become wild just like we can have wild feral cats. But honeybees are like chickens or pigs or cows. They're part of our system of animal husbandry. Honeybee is just one bee. We've got over 275 different species of bees in Vermont. And we've seen almost a third of those species on these blueberry farms, which that blows me away, the diversity that we see on blueberry farms.
The blueberry bushes at Adams Berry Farm in Charlotte provide the perfect laboratory for Nicholson's research.
When I step on this farm, I can smell all that sweet blueberry nectar in the air. I immediately just start hearing bumblebees, boom, boom, going from one bush to another. Those are all wild queens that are living in the fields and the forests surrounding this farm. And they're taking this early spring trip every day from their nest to this just bonanza of pollen and nectar on this farm. And they're taking that pollen and nectar back to their nest to provision their young worker bumblebees to be. So when we talk about wild bees, a lot of those aren't necessarily these large colonies. It's a single solitary queen. A lone wolf she is, just moving through this landscape, collecting pollen and nectar to feed her young larvae back at home.
Nicholson received his PhD in natural resources from UVM in 2018. He began his research by asking what factors make a farm bee-friendly.
We looked at, okay, maybe it's the landscape around that farm. Is it surrounded by forests and meadows and wetlands? Or maybe it's what the farmer's doing on the farm. Are they organic or close to it? Or are they spraying lots of pesticides? And so what we found is, surprise, it's both of those things. And they work in sync, right? Such that if you're a low intense farm, right? You are maybe an organic farm, and you're situated in a landscape with a lot of natural area, we see a lot more abundance and diversity of bees on those farms.
Low input practices go further than promoting pollinator habitats. As Nicholson learned, an abundant bee population equals a better bottom line for the farmer.
We saw that farms with really active, healthy bee communities had yields that were larger, so their farms were producing more berries, but those berries themselves were consistently larger, and they were ripening a little bit earlier. So you had more consistently large berries getting to market a little bit early, and more of them, because those farms had this healthy, active, lively bee community.
With his work at UVM complete, Nicholson is starting his postdoctoral research at the University of California at Davis. As he leaves the Green Mountains for the California coast, Nicholson brings with him the knowledge of what it means to be a steward of the land.
In addition to having the joy of getting to watch and get to know all these beautiful organisms, these wild bees, dealing with Vermont farmers has been just another joy for me. They are an inspiration. They're up here super early, before the bees are, and they're out here super late. And they care so much about not only their farm, but the landscape around their farm and what their farm means to the other animals that live in these natural areas, but also what their farm means to their neighbors. That it isn't always just, about the bottom line, or it isn't always just about minimizing your impact to nature, right? That you have to balance those things always as a farmer. And I learned that here, and I'll take that with me wherever I go.
From the blueberry blossoms to the bees, and from the farmer to the researcher. This is a bee story. That's an A everywhere you look. In Charlotte, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
While bees and other pollinators help make our food, it's up to farmers to keep the food safe and clean. It's not just good business, it's the law. UVM Extension's agricultural engineering team works with farmers to find high-impact, low-cost solutions to keeping food safe. Case in point involves a small farm in Starksboro that needed a way to clean the salad greens they grow. Extension fostered a solution that employed a modified household appliance. Taylor Mendel of Footprint Farm tells us more.
Our farm is called Footprint Farm. It's very small. We grow on about 1.5 acres outside, and we have about 1/4 acre inside in high tunnels. We sell primarily to a CSA with about 80 members most of the year. We also go to the Shelburne Farmers Market and sell to a number of local restaurants and caterers. This behind me is our greens washing line. A greens washing line is where we wash mostly triple washed greens, which are things like salad mix, arugula. We do something called a zesty mix. It is somewhere where we come in through that big door behind me. That's where all of our dirty produce comes in. And then it goes through each bin of clean water, gets drained in the orange baskets, goes into the spinner here, and then gets packed for delivery. Something that's really important for us as a business is to have a product that's very high quality and that lasts longer in the refrigerator than something that somebody could get from the grocery store. A big piece to that is having really clean, really dry leaves once it goes into storage. So we used to use this hand crank restaurant style spinner, and it takes a long time, it's exhausting, and we just couldn't get through very many greens at a time. So we upgraded to a washing machine spinner so that we could set it and forget it, let it spin dry. We were getting super clean, super dry greens that we've gotten up to a month of storage life in the refrigerator.
A washing machine?
Yeah, we are a small farm, so we don't have the space or the resources to get the machines that the bigger farms use. So there are a lot of really great resources for farm hack machinery that we can use on our scale. So what people will do is they'll get a used or more and more new washing machines. They deconstruct it, take away the pieces that don't make sense, and put a switch timer on it so that you can put the greens inside and put it on the spin cycle. So we're not doing the agitate cycle, and you get a really nice dry product. The Maytag was great for a while. It's very loud, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're in here washing greens hour after hour, and you get to the point where you need to wear noise-canceling headphones, it makes it less enjoyable.
How have you worked with UVM Extension on this project?
As we got to talking, Andy said, well, what if I was working on a washing machine conversion project? Would you be willing to test it? And we, at the time, were having a huge issue with our current spinner, and we said, yeah, obviously we'd love to try it, and here we are.
Washing machine spinners are very common on the small farm, and it's really important because it fits the good in-between size. It's not designed for produce, obviously, and there are a lot of extra parts you don't need. You don't need the agitator in there. You don't need all the fancy electronics. You don't even really need the housing on the outside on some models, and then taking that off allows airflow, so it's easier to clean and easier to dry out. A conversion with a timer and maybe a couple added bumpers, including buying a basket. The timers are like $30, the baskets are like $30, and then the rubber bumpers on the other model are like $15 or $20. So really it's between $50 and $100 for a conversion. $400 or $500 for a Maytag, and it gets up $900 to $1,000 for a Speed Queen.
The nice thing about the Speed Queen is that it's extremely quiet. You can have a normal conversation while it's running. So we can have 4 people in here doing lots of different things while the greens line is running, and it doesn't interrupt our workflow. It was like upgrading from a VW Volkswagen Bug with 3 wheels to a Corvette overnight. It was just completely different. UVM Extension is working on issues that are really important for small farms. I have friends who farm in other states, and none of them have the experience with their extension agents that we do. We can email UVM Extension at any time and get a response back relatively quickly with a whole list of resources, tons of links to other resources that they've collected. Or if they don't know, they'll look into it oftentimes if it seems like it's something that would help others.
As we close out this Friday afternoon, we remind all of you that across our region, pick your own operations have opened up. Strawberries, of course, are traditionally the first fruit to arrive. Extension's Andy Chamberlain, who you just saw and heard from in that last video, worked with Full Belly Farm in Moncton, and Andy brought along his camera to share with us the effort it takes to mulch commercial strawberries. So enjoy Andy's video and get out and enjoy the fresh local food in your area.